Well, good evening and welcome to Canberra Decides, an election debate where you'll get to vote, a collaboration between Region Media, Lonsdale Street Studios and me, Genevieve Jacobs, now CEO of Hands Across Canberra, and therefore very invested in building this community. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of this place, the Ngunnawal people, and others with deep ties to this beautiful country. I pay my respects to elders past and present and emerging who have gathered here, debated and decided issues over millennia. In the second of 3 live election debates, we'll look tonight at Canberra's future. What kind of city will this be in 20, 30, 50 years' time? What foundations do we lay now in areas like housing, transport, the economy, infrastructure? 4 politicians are with me, 3 of them party leaders. It is an all-Kurrajong affair. I am joined by Chief Minister Andrew Barr, Canberra Independence leader Thomas Emerson, Liberals leader Elizabeth Lee, Greens leader and Attorney General Shane Rattenbury. We've also assembled with us an expert panel tonight in the studio. I am joined by Dr Andrew Hughes, academic and political analyst, by Archie Sirimokos, who chairs the Canberra Business Chamber Board, and by Corinne Dobson from ACTCOS. They'll be asking questions throughout the debate, and so will you. So please go to it now if you're watching us live on Facebook. I'll have those questions fed through to me live here in the studio. If you've already submitted questions, I have them to hand. I'm not going to get to everything, but we will cover as much as we possibly can. And this is an interactive forum using Slido. It's a bit of our version of the old election worm. It's a very simple system. You might have used it perhaps at a work event. Just scan the QR code that you can see on your screen, or in a new tab, go to slido.com and enter the code 2804134. That's 2804134. So you can ask the candidates questions and you can vote, and that Slido code and QR will be in the bottom right hand corner as a watermark throughout the debate. And the first voting question right now, as you get yourself organised with Slido, who are you planning to vote for? Is it Labor? Is it the Liberals, the Greens or an Independent? And not necessarily this lot. What are your voting intentions around across the board at this election? I'll share the votes as they come in, and they're already starting to explode and move around, which is a very fun thing to watch here in the studio. Bit less comfortable for the candidates, I think. But first, let's give these pollies and would-be pollies the stump. They've got 2 minutes, and they know it's 2 minutes. They're all used to that from the Assembly, to make their pitch to you with no interjections or no questions. So let's go to it. And Shane Rattenbury, I'm going to start with you.
Well, thanks, Genevieve. The Greens want to build a Canberra where people can have a good life, and that means having access to an affordable home, access to convenient public transport. We want to retain the bush capital nature of the city. We want real climate action because we know this matters for a lot of Canberrans. And we want people to be able to access their medical care for free. Now, right now, the reality is that successive federal, Liberal and Labor governments have made a series of political choices which have left us with a cost of living crisis and people struggling to meet the basic housing needs. These things can be overcome by an active ACT government, and the Greens have a really ambitious agenda to try and step into some of these issues and make sure we use all the levers we have locally to make a real impact for the lives of Canberrans. We are ambitious for this city in wanting to have policies and programs that actually break out of the mould, address some of these really big questions, and we have the courage and the ambition to drive these policies through and put them on the table so that Canberrans have a really clear choice at this election. Canberrans are struggling and we want to help them make a real difference. The Greens have been the change makers in this city over the time that we've had an active role in the Parliament, and we are planning to continue to take that on. We've released a series of detailed, ambitious plans, which are all available on our website so people can go and read them later on. But that includes a plan to build and buy 10,000 public homes over the next 10 years. We know governments have underinvested in public housing. We want to create GP clinics in Canberra so Canberrans can get 160,000 new bulk billing appointments a year in the city. We want public transport to be a turn up and go service so you don't have to plan your day around it. It's available. And we want to provide more hours of early childhood care for 3 and 4 year olds so they can get in and get that really early important start in life. All of this is possible, but Canberrans need to get behind it and vote for it. We can build a confident future for our city, a city where everybody has a fair go, and where we are preparing well for the future.
Okay, bang on time. Elizabeth Lee, to you.
Thank you, Genevieve, and it's wonderful to join you tonight. A Canberra Liberals government that I lead wants to be ambitious for our future. We deserve a fresh opportunity for the capital, and I've not minced any words and I've not held back in providing some bold and ambitious policies and vision for what I think should be the best capital in the best country in the world. We have unashamedly focused on cost of living and the housing crisis that we have seen across the term of this 23 years of Labor and the Greens. And we know that there are many Canberrans who have been left behind. We also know that there are many small businesses that are really struggling because of the policy levers that have been pulled by this Labor Greens government. 23 years is enough. 23 years of the same party, and we know that Canberrans are suffering. There's been a lack of commitment in relation to health, education, community safety, and also about basic investment in our suburbs. And that's why 1 year out to the election, one of the first policies that I pushed out was about investment in our suburbs and in our communities, and also about cost of living, and we will be talking about a bold vision for housing into the future. These are some of the policy ideas that we have, and we also want to make sure that we bring world-class events to the nation's capital. And these are some of the conversations that I've been having, and I look forward to the next 30 days being able to get out and about and talking to many Canberrans about a fresh opportunity that a Canberra Liberals government can deliver for the future of our great city.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Thomas Emerson, you're seeking to shake this all up. Off you go.
Thanks, Genevieve. I'm running as an independent because I want to see a government that's responsive to our community and ambitious for our future. Far from having the highest rate of loneliness in the country, Canberra can lead the way in answering the question of how to bring people together in a post-COVID working from home world. Far from having one of the most inequitable education systems in Australia, Canberra can be a world-leading education destination like Oxford or Cambridge, but where the elitism is replaced with a system that prioritises those facing disadvantage. Far from being a boring place, Canberra can be a hub for the arts and major events, a place that people visit to enjoy the thriving nightlife and local music scene. Far from becoming a two-tiered society, our national capital should be a place where nobody is ignored or left behind, where high-quality healthcare and housing are for everyone, not just for those who can afford it. Far from being the least walkable major city in Australia with the lowest public transport usage of all capital cities, Canberra can lean into the mandate we really see in our community to show the world how to transition to a better transport system. Far from having Australia's highest Indigenous incarceration gap, recidivism rates and persistent homelessness rates, Canberra can achieve meaningful reconciliation, going beyond tacked-on consultations and taking ambitious action to close the gap. Instead of continuing to clear beautiful Aussie bushland and build new suburbs that are completely car dependent, with under 5% tree coverage and homes that face the road rather than facing north, we can show the rest of the world how it looks to densify sustainably and to live in harmony with nature as part of nature. The ACT is a small jurisdiction, and far from trailing other states and territories, we can punch above our weight as a first mover, serving as a testbed city for new ideas and innovations, with a high-performance public service that's focused on outcomes rather than processes. Far from being a place where more than 50% of young people fear the future, Canberra can be a place that offers young people a future they feel excited about.
And Andrew Barr.
Thanks very much, Genevieve. ACT Labor is very focused on improving community wellbeing, and we seek to do that through investment in public health care, particularly providing more public health services closer to where people live. We want to continue to expand our community health network to provide more services at our walk-in centres and new community health centres around Canberra's regions. We are the party that builds hospitals in this city, having just completed a major expansion of Canberra Hospital and turning now to a new Northside Hospital on the site of the former Calvary Hospital and now North Canberra Hospital in Bruce. We are very focused on investing in public education, from our school system through to the expansion of our TAFE system, a new campus for the CIT in Woden, and fostering further growth of our higher education system, supporting the University of Canberra, the Australian National University, a new University of New South Wales Canberra campus in our CBD, and ensuring that everyone has equality of opportunity and access to this world-class public education system. We're very focused on delivering a big boost to housing supply, growing our city's housing stock from 200,000 dwellings to 230,000 dwellings over the next 6 years. We're going to continue to invest in arts, culture and sport and recreation activities, both at a local level in each of Canberra's regions and in city building infrastructure, like a new 2,000-seat Canberra Lyric Theatre as the anchor of an arts and cultural precinct in our CBD. We'll continue to invest in climate action. 100% renewable electricity has been delivered under a Labor government. The Big Canberra battery to store that renewable energy, and we'll continue to focus on growing Canberra's economy and our jobs market.
Okay, terrific. I've got the results in from which party our listeners plan to vote for at the upcoming ACT election, and they're interesting. Independents for Canberra, 26%. ACT Labor, 26%. Canberra Liberals, 25%. The ACT Greens, 14%. And 7% of our voters are undecided or unsure, and 2% voting for another party or another independent. So time for your next vote on Slido. Who did it best? Which one of those pictures impressed you most on Canberra's future? Where we're going in the next 10, 20, 30, even 50 years? Go to Slido, the QR code there on your screens, or in a new tab, slido.com, and the code is 2804134. But let's go now to our Q&A, and if we're wondering what this city is going to look like in the future, perhaps we'll start with where and how we will all live. And Archie Sirimokos, I'm going to lead off with you.
Thanks, Genevieve. I'll just pick up on some of the things you just said. I'd like to understand the candidates' respective visions for Canberra. What's the makeup of our population, housing types and culture over the next, and what will the city look like in 20, 30, 50 years from now, and what they think the government needs to do to realise that vision? And
Andrew Barr, I'll start off with you.
Thanks, Archie. We've obviously grown a lot as a city. In the time I've been living here, since 1977, the city has more than doubled in size. In recent years, we've been the fastest growing of all of the Australian cities. We've seen very strong growth in our labour market, and we've seen increased diversity in our population. More than 1 in 3 Canberrans have a parent born overseas. So we are seeing some really exciting opportunities for our city to continue to diversify. Our economy, as it grows, offers more opportunities for the community, and it provides, I think, more opportunity for a more interesting and creative Canberra. I think that's what a lot of people want. We've come through an era of being very bureaucratic and public sector focused, and that will always be Canberra's core reason for being. But our future, our next 10, 20, 30, 50 years, will see an increased diversity in our economy, in our population, and I think in our national and international engagement.
Elizabeth Lee, I want to go to you on housing. The Liberals have made some play about everyone wanting their own block, everyone wanting the opportunity to have their own house. I'm wondering, if that's the case, where's the edge of this city? Where does the development end? Is it West Murrumbidgee, for example?
The Canberra Liberals have always advocated for genuine choice when it comes to housing, and housing affordability has been an incredibly important issue, especially over the last couple of years, and coupled with the cost of living crisis, it's meant that housing has become unaffordable for not only the people who are finding it hard and challenging, but also for the young generation who are now starting to lose that dream of ever owning their own home. We think that genuine choice when it comes to housing options is incredibly important. I myself, spent most of my adult life living in an apartment, and that suited me really well. But once I had kids, I knew that I wanted something a little bit bigger. Now, you just have to have a look at the fact that we've had 12,000 applications for 100 blocks, for example, for single dwelling, residential blocks for development. And you know that there is certainly demand for standalone housing. But of course, apartments, the frequently termed the missing middle, the dual lockies and townhouses also, of course, play an important role. And I think that ACT, being a unique jurisdiction where the ACT government has sole control over release of residential development land, plus having the laws in relation to planning, as well as tax settings to incentivise more housing, whatever the typology, and we've been badly let down. So those are all the factors that a Canberra Liberals government will look at. We will have a very bold and ambitious plan for housing, because we are going to be looking at about 700,000 in terms of population by 2050, and we need to be prepared for that.
I'm just going to take you back to the question though, which is where is the end of that? Where is the edge of the city? Where does it finish?
There's no doubt that we have to have a look at where people want to live, and obviously access to essential services is going to be important. But there are areas that do have to be looked at. Obviously, Western Edge has been looked at for quite some time, but we know that there are some ecological concerns about that, so we need to be careful on that front. West Tuggeranong has been touted as an area that's prime for development, given that Tuggeranong town centre is actually not where the centre should be. And of course, you know, under ACT Labor Greens, they've actually bought land in New South Wales to the northwest as well, and that's pushed that footprint out. There's also options in relation to looking further on the side, kind of near Symonston in the inner south, and moving toward that direction.
Shane Rattenbury, to you, is the bush capital sustainable as a vision? I mean, is sustainable housing sustainable, as it were, given the costs for achieving 7-star ratings and the kinds of pressures we're discussing about where we put the houses, how much it costs, what everyone's entitled to?
When it comes to the physical shape of our city, we do think it's important that we think about a more compact city in the future. Every time we put a new suburb on the edge and we have endless spread across, say, the Murrumbidgee, you are eating up that critical habitat that surrounds our city, eating into farmland. The Greens imagine a future where we see more choice of housing types. At the moment, really in that thing between standalone houses and large apartment buildings. We want to see more row houses, townhouses, these low-rise apartments where people can live close to the services, close to people in their community. There's opportunity for our older residents to downsize. People are able to get around easily on public transport. They're able to walk and cycle comfortably. At the moment, you need a car to live in Canberra. It is a car-dominated city. That's not a very people-friendly city, and we'd like to see that space. And if you do that, those green spaces that we have at the moment are ever more important, and we need to work hard to protect them and look after them carefully.
Corinne Dobson, this goes to your concerns about climate resilience and the impact on housing vulnerability. What are your questions?
Sure, we know, I mean, Canberrans are grappling with the effects of climate change now, but climate change and its effects are set to escalate over the coming decades. So given that, what would you do to prepare communities and ensure they are climate resilient, and in particular for people on low incomes and those who are housing vulnerable?
Okay, Thomas Emerson, to you.
I think when it comes to social housing, that's where we should start. We've seen some interesting movement in that area, which is fantastic. What we haven't seen is much of an investment in the housing stock. Our public housing stock's gone backwards in the last 12 years under the most progressive government in the country. So people who are increasingly in need of housing don't have a safe place to sleep, aren't able to find one. So if we can get things right there, then that can translate across the rest of the system. I agree with Shane's point that we're interested in a more compact city. We talk a lot about climate adaptation. We talk about being forward-thinking from that in that area when it comes to climate change and introducing new forms of transport, these sorts of things. But I actually don't think we're leaning into the opportunity we have as a city. Canberra is so unique, and we all love to have access to nature reserves. I know young people are really despair at not being able to afford their own future, but also despair at runaway habitat clearing and species extinction. So I think Canberra can be a testbed city, you know, and I'd really love to see us lean on the federal government to view this place in that way, as a place where we can prove what a sustainable future looks like, what a livable future looks like in a changing climate. And also the final point I make, and I think it's one of the things that we see when people are opposed to some more densification, is that we need shared community spaces to bring people together and bring people together where they don't have to pay to spend time together.
Canberra is the petri dish, one of the things that we absolutely love in this city. Can we prove a case for the rest of the country? Andrew Barr, I'm going to come back to you with a question from one of the listeners. Mark says, what's more important, $41 million worth of subsidies for the horse racing industry or a new well-planned suburb at Thoroughbred Park?
Well, I don't think it's a binary choice. I think it's quite possible to develop that precinct in a way that supports new housing, supports a range of community activities, but doesn't seek to compulsorily acquire the Canberra Racing Club's land. This is being set up as a political bun fight, largely around an agenda from one political party to end horse racing. Now, they're welcome to have that view, and it's been debated in the Assembly on dozens of occasions over the last 4 years. But there is a pathway through here that reduces the level of public subsidy to the horse racing industry and delivers a housing outcome. That's a win-win for everyone, I would have thought, providing viability for the industry into the future and delivering a housing outcome. That's something you would want to work towards, I would have thought.
Andrew Hughes, I'll turn to you. Your questions on this?
Yeah, look, I think this is, Canberra's a city of vision. The original capital plan, for example, is visionary. Even as recently as the Cotter Dam, visionary to build that. What is the one infrastructure project you want to look back in 20 years' time and say you had a role in doing?
Okay, Shane, start with you.
I think light rail has been a really important city-shaping piece of infrastructure. We've seen in the corridor where it's been built, it's had an enormous impact on helping to create that more compact city, people being able to live different lifestyles. We've seen 40% of the users are people who did not use public transport but have seen the convenience and the opportunity. We want all Canberrans to have access to such great infrastructure that's proved to be so popular on the north side, and is about tackling climate change, providing emissions-free transport, but also helping to shape a city where people have got an ability to move around really easily.
Let's just go with the vision for a moment. I've got some questions about the existing arguments we're having about the theatre, the stadium, the convention centre and so on and so forth. What's out of the box in just perhaps a 10, 15 second answer? Elizabeth, what would you like to see?
Oh, I mean, obviously we've announced our major plans for the stadium and the convention centre, and I think they will anchor the city in a way that we haven't seen before.
Okay, Thomas Emerson.
Sorry, you said 15
Yeah,
seconds.
you did.
Right?
And you nailed it.
Just run, follow directions.
Right, well, I'm looking at my notes. You'd finished. Well done. Thomas Emerson?
I really love the City to Lake vision from 10 years ago. We've spent millions of dollars preparing that vision, and it looks fantastic on paper. I'd love to see it in reality. Let's tunnel Parks Way and connect these important pieces of infrastructure and reactivate the city, really make it walkable. I reckon that was 20 seconds, 25.
No, doing well and getting rid of Parks Way. Thumbs up from me. And Barr.
We've got to focus on the core infrastructure that our city needs. So we need to build the Northside Hospital. Once we've done that, then I think there is room in the infrastructure budget for other projects that include things like stadiums, convention centres, and some of the other stages of light rail. They're all projects we put forward in our 10-year infrastructure plan, but you've got to prioritise. We've got to build that hospital first.
Okay, so from housing comes transport. That's how we get to where we're going in this bright new city of ours. Elizabeth Lee, can we really build this big sparkling city and expect everyone to catch an electric bus?
There's no doubt that when you have a look at the lack of a business case for stage 2B, that many Canberrans are asking the same question that the opposition has been asking for many, many years. And that is to be upfront with the community about, what it's going to cost, when it will actually be delivered and the route. And despite the fact that this was touted probably about 10 years ago, the governing parties still haven't been upfront with the community about it. You know what, if we had all the money in the world, why wouldn't you do everything that is in the plan? But the fact is that any government must have a priority list, and it is about making sure that they put forward a justification for why they're choosing that over something else. For us, we know that at the moment, in terms of even the government's own figures about how fast the light rail will take from Woden to the city is going to be about double the time that it currently takes. And the Canberra Liberals have pushed forward a people-focused public transport plan that will make sure that we improve the bus system. We know that people can catch the bus and will do so if they don't have to be going, oh, I'm waiting 2 hours for a bus on the weekends. We know that if we improve the bus journey experience, that people will be more likely to catch it. We also know that if it's going to go to the routes where people want to go when they want to get there, that will make a huge difference. I mean, we put in a lot of investment in terms of our public transport policy, including a weekly capped fare so that people can catch the bus every day and know that they're going to have one amount that they're going to pay. Also a free city travel zone so that once people are on there for short distances, they're not penalised and they can catch that bus. And also about making smart technology available to ensure that bus journeys are prioritised and affordable and also are going to be delivering the results that all Canberrans need and want.
Shane Rattenbury, I'm going to pick that up. We now have Fare Free Friday. What about bigger subsidies for public transport? What about much cheaper fares to get people on and using it?
I think the more important factor is actually making sure there are options available for people. Right now, Canberrans are almost forced into needing to own a vehicle, and that drives transport poverty. If we pick up the point Corinne made earlier, these issues are about equity. We want to see great investment in a range of transport options so that people can make a choice. It'd be interesting to see how it goes over the next 6 or 8 weeks, where there is a free period of public transport and whether that sees a pickup in patronage. But certainly the expert advice we get is that's not the key factor. The key factor is actually about making the service more frequent, making it easier to get onto and giving people options.
Thomas Emerson, we've got contested visions here. What would an independent advocate for light rail? Is it a stage per decade? Is it accelerating the whole thing? Is it no light rail at all? Presuming you and some of your compatriots get in, where does your vote land?
For me, it's been such a strange thing to see how ideological light rail has become. Like it's a weird piece of, it's a weird project to become so ideologically driven. I think what I'd like to see is for us to continue the planning process that we're on, reach a decision point regarding construction of the next stage and make a really clear-headed decision about whether we're spending the money in the best way that we can. Do we have an equitable system where people across the ACT can benefit from it? I think some of the loss of the mandate for extending light rail comes from some of the further out suburbs where people don't feel they actually gain a benefit from that and can't access it through through buses and so on. What I'd also like to see, and I don't see in the debate a lot of the time, is more of a real conversation about active travel, making it possible for people to walk places, ride places. I used to ride my bike all the time. I now have a little boy, and now I'm a little bit more safety conscious, and I just actually don't ride my bike as much as I would because I was, felt more comfortable riding on the road previously. So what we would do as independents is take every decision at face value and not write a blank check, but also not oppose something simply on the basis of the need to differentiate politically.
Andrew Hughes, can I go to you? A big, smart, connected economy does sell itself politically. What's your question on where the transport dollars should go?
Yeah, we talk a lot about active transport, yet in Canberra we don't spend a lot of money on shared paths, for example. A lot of them are in disrepair, they're run down. A lot of women won't use those paths at night because they're not safe or they don't feel safe on those paths. All you have to do is ride on one in winter and you see how dark they are. They're barren of people. And yet, the other thing too we're talking about now is more money on public transport, and yet you go through a bus interchange at night. I don't know if any of you do, I have to. And they are again devoid of people. They seem overrun, they seem bad. They're not safe places to feel like you should be at night. I'm a decent sized guy, I tend to be left alone. Not everyone is lucky as me. I think when you're talking about connected public transport, my question is, how do you fix these really core issues and belief and trust in the system itself? You talk a lot about vision, but sometimes in politics, vision has to be tangible. What tangibles can you guarantee right now to people listening that you will deliver in this area, which will make public transport experience and active transport experience better in the next term of office?
Andrew Barr, that's been your responsibility. Go for it.
Improved lighting, better transport facilities at each of the interchanges. Transport officers, we're investing in security within the public transport network, both light rail and buses. And I think security cameras also give people a greater sense of well-being and safety in those settings.
Okay, I've got another question from a listener who wants to know how you all get around the city. What means of transport do you take? Is it public transport? Is it bikes? Is it cars? How do you do it? Shane Rattenbury, where do you go?
The three modes I use, I walk to work often. I'm fortunate enough to live close enough. I cycle. I also have an EV. I have to drive, of course, to get around to the many events we go to. And light rail works really well for some of my journeys. So I'm probably on a bit of all of them, really.
Okay, Elizabeth Lee?
So I have previously used all modes, especially when I was before being in politics. I used to ride my bike to university, that's where I used to work, and other times I would either walk or I've caught the city buses before. But I have to say that now it's pretty much 100% car, mostly because I've got two young kids to wrangle around, and there's no easy way of getting around if you're travelling with young kids at the moment, except by car.
Thomas Emerson?
I was fortunate for a while to set up my business very close to home where I didn't have to have a car for a period, which is great, and to ride my bike everywhere. Now I'm kind of running there sometimes, which is maybe not an answer from others. So running around, I'm not using the bike as much as I was, like I said. And now that we're in campaign mode, I've got my A-frames in the back seat, so the car's being used a lot more than I'd like. But my little boy loves the light rail, so that's more of an option, and we're right near it.
Andrew Barr, how do you get around?
I walk a lot. Try to get more than 10,000 steps every day. When I do drive, I've got an EV and I use the light rail and we'll catch the bus.
Okay. I'm going to give you the results from which candidate delivered the best pitch on Canberra's future. This is the votes as they stand, and they do tend to shift around a little bit as the debate goes on. We can see them moving in front of us, actually. So currently, Andrew Barr, ACT Labor, 39%. Thomas Emerson, Independents for Canberra, 26%. Elizabeth Lee, Canberra Liberals, 21%. And Shane Rattenbury, ACT Greens, 12%. None of them 1% of our voters, and unsure and undecided 1% of our voters. Let's turn to what we can build and pay for and the great infrastructure funding competition that we've got going on. We've got a number of priorities at the moment: the theatre, the convention centre, the stadium. Archie Sirimokos, let's hear your questions about investing in the city.
I guess I want to understand what you as leaders of the territory will do to encourage investment in Canberra. One of the things that we're hearing in the business community is that people are divesting and leaving Canberra. What measures are you looking at, or would you look at, to incentivise businesses and investors to come to Canberra to assist with things like infrastructure spend?
Yeah, Elizabeth Lee, I'll start with you.
There are a number of factors that go into attracting people into Canberra and attracting investment into Canberra. And obviously the latest announcements that we've made in relation to major infrastructure projects have been the National Convention Centre and the stadium. And both of those projects deliver a broader economic benefit to the community as a whole. I mean, just to compare the convention centre in Adelaide, which last year brought $200 million of economic benefit, and Adelaide is the size that we sort of compete with on the convention space. But being the Nationals capital means that we have so much more opportunity to be able to host world leaders. And imagine if, we had a space where we could host, CHOGM as an example. It's a kind of project that, of course, would be really, really ripe for federal funding. In fact, I think absolutely even more than 50% federal funding on that front. The stadium is something that, of course, is going to bring a broader benefit to the economy, the flow-on effect to boosting tourism, the local businesses, especially the hospitality businesses that will really, really thrive if they have world-class events in terms of sport, in terms of international artists. I mean, events, I don't know, perhaps maybe even something like motocross, if we're able to host those right here. Not only would Canberrans be able to access world-class events here in our home city, but also we'll be able to draw in tourists that will come regularly from around the region as well. The other aspect, of course, is to ensure that they do have a livability here as businesses. Many businesses start here, and we know that, but we also know that we have the highest rate of businesses that fail here. And the things that we hear from business is the difficulty they have in dealing with government and the incredibly high taxes and charges that they're hit with. And I want to be a government that lead a government that starts with yes to business, and I think that is an incredibly important cultural change that we need to have.
Elizabeth Lee, follow-on question for you from one of our listeners, Lucas, who says, how does the ACT Liberal Party propose to pay down the debt? And my question to you, if we've got all these contested, very large infrastructure projects, you're suggesting a rate freeze. You're suggesting saving people $2,000 by not increasing rates. How will we pay for all these things at once?
So the rates policy that we've announced is to deliver a fairer, more transparent rate system. Now, there was a promise that was made in 2012 about how the tax reform agenda would be revenue neutral, and we know that that hasn't been the case. Many Canberrans have been slugged with between sort of 7 and 9% increases year on year, and that's a feedback that we get the most, especially during this cost of living crisis. The Canberra Liberals' fairer, more transparent rates policy does several things. One is that it is still increasing, and I think most Canberrans know that rates need to be paid so that government services can be delivered. But what we are doing is delivering a cap on the rate increases. It provides certainty, and for households who are now having to watch their budget, it does make a huge difference. The other aspect is to introduce an independent valuer, independent of the Revenue Office, so that Canberrans have full transparency about how their rates are calculated, because of course it's based on the calculation of the unimproved land value. In terms of, obviously the spending, the two infrastructure projects that we have announced, they're big ones, and we have been fully transparent about what we believe the cost of the build will be. But that's before factoring in federal funding commitments. That's before factoring in potential funding options, exploring a public-private partnership, and that's before factoring in offsets, of course, in terms of selling the land that the current National Convention Centre is situated at. And these are all of those factors that will go into play.
Corinne Dobson, let me go to you while we're having this discussion about where we should spend the very big bucks. What are your questions about how we spend what's in fact always a limited amount of money in the ACT?
Yeah, well, I mean, particularly in the context of a growing population and an ageing population, how will you ensure that the ACT's healthcare system and our community support services are sustainable and equitable for future generations.
Shane Rattenbury, I'm going to go to you on that. We're having this wonderful conversation about all the big shiny toys we might be able to have. What's your response on healthcare?
Well, government budgets are all about priorities, and certainly I'm really focused on making sure that as a basis we've got the housing that Canberrans need. That's why our first policy announcement was to commit to building 10,000 government homes over the next 10 years. Having a secure place to live is a fundamental basis for people to have confident, safe, secure lives. And in a context where people are talking about stadiums and stuff, we just don't share that priority. That would be nice to have, but we desperately need investment in housing. We need investment in our education infrastructure. Many of our schools are ageing and we need new schools. We need to be investing in our health infrastructure. And when it comes to community services, we need to support the NGOs that provide so many of the important services that help people in our community. We've seen them getting CPI increases for recent years, but the population's grown dramatically and we've not seen the budget increases. We need to prioritise our budget and focus on those fundamental services and facilities that people need. We've got a stadium at the moment. We should just freshen up the one we've got and focus on the services our communities really need.
Andrew Hughes, can I go to you? Any of the independents could have a casting vote on this issue of where we spend the big dollars. What's your question to them?
How will they guarantee that the spending isn't going to be just go beyond a certain level? What guarantees will you have in place if you do a deal with one of these other parties? What guarantee will you put in place to ensure that the spending doesn't go beyond that deal?
Thomas Emerson?
Well, yeah, we hear this as a concern with people, debt repayments as a proportion of expenditure. It's gone from 3 to 6% in a recent period. It's headed toward 10%. It's a problem when we're talking about funding these sorts of promises. And what I'd like to talk about is the promises. I mean, we have had a Labor Greens government for a long time. During that period, we've just heard a strong commitment to social housing. Our social housing stock's gone backwards. We've got 2,500 people who are homeless here in our city. 870 kids reported to homelessness services last year. 180 of those kids were alone, not accompanied by a family member. And so I actually find it frustrating, and I think voters find it frustrating to hear about all of these commitments in the 4 weeks leading up to an election that actually often don't get delivered. I mean, we've been talking about a new convention centre since 2002 when the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting couldn't be hosted here. It had to be moved to Brisbane. We've talked about a new stadium for 15 years. We've been talking about a new civic pool. In fact, it was identified as a high priority on the ACT Aquatic Facilities Planning Framework in 2013, so that's 10 years. I don't have a whole lot of confidence that these promises will be delivered, so I don't know how much stock people put into these things. It almost feels like New Year's resolutions. Like, I'm going to change. I promise, darling. I'm going to start training. I'm going to stop drinking, and I'm going to start eating clean. And it lasts a month, or this is the 4 weeks before the election, and then 4 years later we're in the same place. So independents can be there, applying positive pressure, holding whoever forms government to account, and saying, look, some of these promises are great. Can we crack on and deliver them? Because the longer we delay, the longer they cost, and the more people who are left behind, which has been what's happening in the last 15 years.
Andrew Bell, let's unpack this a little more. Does investing in the big ticket items constrain not only health and education, but also things like funding green spaces, livability, room to breathe? We need cash from the development. We know that's one of the great engines for the ACT. So how do we balance this question of providing needs but achieving the vision?
Well, we have to maintain a rate of revenue growth. So I think a big point of difference in this campaign will largely be around how we will fund public services into the future. And you can't do that at state and territory level, the level of government that has the biggest service delivery responsibility but the weakest revenue base of all levels of government in Australia, if you are throwing away revenue. So we do need to grow revenue faster than expenditure. But if we want to deliver all of the services, then there are trade-offs, there are opportunity costs and decisions and priorities that need to be made. And sometimes you get hit by external events. So I take the criticism that some things have taken longer to deliver, but there was a global pandemic and we did have to urgently address in 2014 buying back more than 1,000 homes and taking out $1 billion loan from the Commonwealth in order to address Mr Fluffy. And that was an urgent priority that was unexpected. It arrived, we had to deal with it, and we did. But it did come at a cost. There's only so many resources in our city, not just financial, but workforce and materials. And so there are choices that have to be made. But a starting point in all of this is if you keep on running down your revenue base, you cannot provide the services. You've got to be able to pay people well, to attract them into a range of professions that smaller cities will always struggle with. So if we continue to denude our revenue base, then we should not be surprised that we can't deliver everything. And what I have found as the Treasurer and my experience in the Assembly is that I get a lot of requests to spend money, a lot of requests to reduce tax, and then an expectation that with less revenue and more expenditure, somehow the budget will balance. That doesn't work out. There is no magic pudding. It's a hard grind at state and territory level. You can't just assume you're going to get funding from the Commonwealth. You can't just assume that the economy will always grow and deliver extra revenue. So you do have to make tough decisions. And we've had to over the last 10 years.
And an interesting comment from Mark, who's listening. Would any candidate or party support the ACT setting up a state-owned enterprise and invite co-investment, things like solar farms, battery manufacture, etc., with a view to being a renewable energy exporter to the grid? I'll leave that as a comment for a moment because Peter has a really pressing question. Is Tuggers still getting the ice rink?
Yes. The short answer is yes.
Okay, let's turn to the economy. Andrew Hughes, I want to go to you first. What's your question about how a future Canberra economy might look?
Yeah, Andrew touched on a really good point then about revenue base, and it's always been a concern here in Canberra about our revenue base. How will we grow the revenue base in the future other than, say, taxation or increased rates? What are your ideas for growing our revenue base here in the ACT?
Okay, Elizabeth Lee.
Thank you, and I think that's a really, really good question. There's no doubt that obviously ACT, you can't compare to a jurisdiction like WA, for example, in terms of the revenue base. But let's be very clear. The ACT hasn't had a revenue problem. It's actually had a waste problem. So, you know, you think about the hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars that have been thrown away and wasted on dodgy procurements and some of these contracts that have obviously made the media, including some that have been before the Integrity Commission. And the lack of ministerial responsibility obviously has really concerned many, many Canberrans. So the revenue problem is actually not a revenue problem in a vacuum. We're talking about it in the context of government spending, or in most instances, government waste that has come to the public arena. There's no doubt also, of course, that the Canberra Liberals have been unapologetically talking about improving the diversification of the economy here as well, with making sure that we are doing everything we can to support business. And, you know, ACT was the only jurisdiction that went backwards in terms of business investment last year as a minus 9.5%. The only jurisdiction in Australia that was in the negative when it came to business investment, and we hear a number of reasons why, and that's one of the reasons why we're talking about major infrastructure projects that are an investment in our future, but also for the growth of our future economy. You know, there's a lot of research that we have pushed out in terms of why that is the case, and for our infrastructure pipeline, we won't be adding a $4 billion tram on top of that to ensure that we are making sure that the investment decisions that we make as a government on infrastructure projects deliver the most economic, social and cultural benefit to the entire community.
Archie Sirimokos, on future budget strategy, what do you and the Business Chamber need to know?
Really want to understand the spending side because I think we've touched on that a little bit, that spending is potentially an issue and spending obviously with a revenue base that's limited. So how do we spread the revenue base? That is it population growth, for example, or is it something else? And how do we rein in spending and where?
Andrew Barr, to you.
Well, we invest a third of our budget in health, a quarter in education. So combined, they are more than half of our budget, and that is largely the salaries, wages, superannuation and other elements of our workforce. There's 9,000 staff in Canberra Health Services and about 7,000 staff in the Education Directorate. So those are the two core responsibilities for the state government element, if you like, of territory governance. We have a local government responsibility as well, and that is about 15% of the total territory budget. We get some support from the Commonwealth for some of those services, so national partnership agreements in health, hospitals, in education, in skills, are all important. And for the first time in a decade or more, we have national partnerships in a number of these areas that I think reflect the growing costs that the states and territories are facing. So the change of federal government 2 years ago did make a difference. That's one way that we can grow our share of revenue, by the Commonwealth doing more in partnership with each state and territory. But more broadly, we need to grow our economy, we need to grow our labour market, and the fact that we now have more than 270,000 jobs in our economy, a record level. We set a target of 250,000 jobs by 2025. We smashed through that to 270,000. So payroll tax is an important revenue source. It's now our number one own source revenue line. So a strong labour market, full employment, that's the best thing you can do to address cost of living. People who have a job have a higher income than people who don't, and ensuring that you continue to attract inbound investment. There were some questions earlier along that line. We need to be active in the Australian marketplace and in the international marketplace to attract inbound investment, and we have been very successful in that regard. And you see that in the projects that are being developed and the level of interest that there is in land release, particularly in our CBD and in our new suburban estates. So I think there's a lot of great opportunities, but you've got to go and seize them. You have to be active, particularly in Sydney and Melbourne, but also in some of the major international markets where we source our investment, and Singapore is a really good example of that.
Corinne Dobson, what are your questions about resilience and adaptability when we're talking budget priorities?
Sure. Well, Andrew mentioned a few things there about growing the labour market, and that being obviously an important way to ensure a resilient economy. But recognising that we do face a number of potential challenges, such as an ageing population. We know the proportion of people over the age of 65 is set to grow, so that potentially presents some issues in terms of relying on a labour market. Also, the ongoing shortage of affordable housing and an ageing population. So in that context, what plans do you have to ensure that the economy is resilient, that it's equitable as well, and able to adapt to some of those challenges that we are likely to face in the coming decades?
Shane Rattenbury, you've been a partner in government. What's your response?
Yeah, when we look at Canberra's future economy and future growth, we obviously had a strong history as a government town. Our university sector, I think, is really vital to the dynamism of the future of this city, both in being an export market, but also being a place that creates new technologies, new ideas, new spin-offs. So I see that as being a very powerful driver of future sectors like ICT, cybersecurity, important areas like that. The clean energy revolution of the future is going to be in many ways invented here in Canberra. We are such a driver of those kind of technologies. That sort of growth will be really important, but we also need to invest in our vocational education for those who are not university minded, that we are creating great jobs for people in trades, which are such an essential part of our transition to a clean energy future. So we also need to see infrastructure as an investment. Yes, it's an expenditure side of the equation, but it's also about building our capability for the future, recognising that we will have more citizens of Canberra to actually help pay for these as we go along. I think a lot of infrastructure projects are often thought about as the upfront cost, but the reality is we'll pay for them over a decade, a couple of decades, and that's how we think carefully. Equity is also about future generations, not just the current generation.
Thomas Emerson, is there another way around this? I'll go back to the question from Mark a moment ago about state-owned enterprises, inviting co-investment, achieving some of the major goals that we've got by using other people's capital rather than our own. Is that something that's attractive to you?
Something that I hear from the small business community, this is partly how I came, to this place. I run a small business. I spoke with a lot of people who are running small businesses, and they would love to have a government that really partners with them. I'm hearing one story from Mr. Barr about what's happening in terms of investment. I'm hearing a different story from Archie from the business community saying people aren't investing here. There's a lot of great stuff happening in the ACT. We've got an incredible university sector. We're taking out patents at twice the national average rate. That's really fantastic. But everyone knows what happens in Canberra is people who study here and then leave and then come back. And it's that period where they leave where people can be the most productive and creative and innovative. So I think we actually really do have an opportunity in that critical period to encourage people to stay here. And I've heard stories of people who are running, they've got startups, they're trying to reach that scale-up phase, approaching the ACT government, seeking investment or maybe seeking a place to set up a larger operation and being told, look, have you spoken with New South Wales or Victoria yet? Because there's more attractive incentives there. We don't have anything for you. So we are in a competition for talent with other jurisdictions. I think we could be throwing more punches than we are currently. And that's a real opportunity for us to diversify our economy, perhaps depend a little less on land sales and take a longer term view of how to build that base.
Final questions from me. This election has perhaps more potential for change than we've seen for quite a while. So I've got a short-term future question, and that is which one of you is going to run the territory and with whose help? Andrew Barr, is it you, and for how long?
Well, we certainly go into this election optimistic that we can hold the seats we currently hold and possibly win some more. History of self-government over 10 elections now says that it is unlikely that any one party will win enough seats to govern in their own right. And so we will obviously respect the election result and see who is on the crossbench and have a discussion in that context. We have been able to successfully reach agreements with the Greens party where there has been an alignment of particular policy priorities and run effective and stable government for an extended period of time. But of course every election will present a new scenario once the count is concluded, and we will see what happens after the 19th of October. But you cannot take anything for granted in a Hare-Clark electoral system and in a parliament that is as diverse as ours and a community that is as engaged as ours in politics. It is very important to keep on campaigning right to the last minute for every last vote.
You wear out the shoe leather. Shane Rattenbury, recent media reporting this week says that you could be the Chief Minister, that you might have put your hand up. Who are you going to form coalition with?
I think it is important that you look into that future with a really constructive mind. The committee wants us to get on and deliver stuff. As the Greens, we have been a really constructive player in the ACT and we've got big ideas for the future. We do hear people saying they want a break from sort of business as usual thinking. They are looking for those bigger ideas. If we were to win just 2 more seats, we would be level peaking with the Labor and Liberal parties, and that opens up a range of possibilities. Whoever gets elected, we are going to need to form some sort of partnerships, and we've certainly got a track record of being able to deliver the policies we've taken to election by working in partnership with others, and we think that is a pathway for the future.
Elizabeth Lee, could you make it to government with the independents' help?
Look, it's an interesting question, and I think that it's the goal of any major party to try and get majority government. There's no doubt about that. But, we do have to be realistic, and in a Hare-Clark system, and, if history tells us anything, I think the last majority government was under Stanhope back 20 years ago. So it is a big ask, and there's no doubt that Hare-Clark can also throw up some really, really interesting results at the end of the day as well. Look, I'm very, very hopeful because, we have been out on the ground since day one. People say, hey, has a campaign kicked off? And I said, when you're in opposition, campaigning kicks off on day one after the election. So the whole term, my team and I have been out and about, and I lead a really diverse team. And I'm not talking just gender and ethnicity. I'm talking about those life experiences, the professional experiences. We've got new mums, we've got business owners, we've got professionals, we've got community leaders, and it is those conversations that my team are having that give us a lot of hope about our chances this election.
Thomas Emerson, the Canberra Independents say they're not a party, but you're independents. You or someone else could make or break this. So how far would a governing agreement be? What are you looking for from any one of the 3 people that you're sitting with there on the panel?
Well, I'm tempted to follow Mr. Rattenbury's strategy of declaring we are intending to form government. I'll be the Chief Minister.
Let's just move past that one fairly quickly, shall we?
3 days of media attention. It's really genius. Look, we're going into this in good faith. We're hearing from people who want to see real change. And my view is a vote for any of the 3 major parties is a vote for the status quo, where the optics are so often prioritised over taking real action. It's a vote for the traditional political system, where what's best for the party too often gets in the way of what's best for us. And it's a vote for the standard way of doing things, where political self-interest keeps decision makers from holding themselves and each other to account. So we're calling for people to vote independent, to challenge the status quo, to create change. To answer your question, we have some conditions. We've been building a policy platform based on what we're hearing from our community, what people want to see change, and expert advice about how best to deliver that. We're going into this in good faith and willing to negotiate with any prospective governing party on the basis of those commitments that we've made, and also ensuring that they don't have any commitments that are objectionable to our community. So we think what we're hearing is that people think an independent crossbench will create a more constructive, collaborative and forward-moving, action-oriented assembly. So that's our goal.
So again there though, you're saying we, and yet there's a bunch of you who are all independents. So are you deciding this together? Is one or other of you deciding, I'd like to go with the Liberals, I'd like to go with Labor, I'd like to give Mr Rattenbury a shot at being Chief Minister?
We've agreed to a set of principles. 2 of those core principles, there are 10, you can look them up on the website, they're almost like the 10 commandments for independence. 2 of them are that we'll collaborate wherever we can. That's with each other, and that's with other MLAs, that's with the community, that's with experts, and another is we're completely free to disagree at all times. And so we'd aim to collaborate and come to a shared position, but there's no mechanism within our organisation to force anyone to say or do anything. So look, it's really open, but we're confident we'll make the right decision if put in the position to do so.
Okay, it's time to vote again on Slido. If you're not logged in, scan that QR code that you can see on your screens, or go into a new tab in slido.com and enter the code 2804134 and tell us who you're voting for now. Have you changed your mind? Vote now. I'll give you a minute to log in and tell you what the results are. But it's been a fiery and interesting debate, and we're going to do one more of these next week, the same time and same channel. You'll have Deputy Chief Minister Yvette Berry, the Greens' Rebecca Vassarotti, Ed Cox from the Liberals, and Vanessa Picker from Canberra Independents. They're all joining me here in the Lonsdale Street studios on September 25 at 6 p.m. And you can continue to watch these debates right up until the election itself. We think that they're informative, they're useful, they're giving you a chance to see what the candidates are like under pressure without any of the questions having been forecast beforehand. So I want to thank everyone who's been part of this tonight. Thank you very much indeed to the Lonsdale Street studio for producing this event so professionally, to the Region team and to all of you for participating with questions and votes. I want to also thank our expert panel who've approached this with both thoughtfulness and a good degree of passion. Dr. Andrew Hughes, terrific to have you with us. Archie Sirimokos, thank you for your contribution. Corinne Dobson, thank you very much indeed for your perspective. And also to our politicians, Shane Rattenbury, Greens leader, Elizabeth Lee, Liberals leader, Thomas Emerson, not the leader of a party, just the leader of a group of people who are thinking along the same-ish lines.
Something like that.
And Andrew Barr, Chief Minister for Labor, of course. And let me go to the votes that are coming in on Slido, moving around very quickly. Since participating in this forum, have you changed your mind on who to vote for? Our first option is I will now vote for the Canberra Liberals, and that's receiving 33%. I'll now vote for ACT Labor, popping up to 25%. I'll now vote for Independents for Canberra, 15%. I'll now vote for the ACT Greens, 14%. 11% of people say that they haven't changed their vote. I do wonder about that a little bit.
We're all voting independent.
In the course of this. And about 2% of people say they're unsure or undecided. But the one big change that we have seen is I will now vote for another party or independent, now receiving just 0% of the vote. See, your job here is done. You've convinced at least one person, if not more, that they now have a firm idea about who to vote for. Look, terrific to have all of your company. Thank you very much indeed for being involved. Please join us again next week for the third and final debate in our election series. And of course, the best way to ensure that democracy's interests are served here in the ACT is to get out and vote. And I want to thank everyone who's been with us. I'm Genevieve Jacobs. This is Region Media, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you very much.